now, last but definitely not least, we have Robert Lipowski, Principal Threat Intelligence Researcher at ESET. His presentation is titled, "You Will Always Remember This as the Day You Finally Caught FamousSparrow." Kind of already sounds like a movie trailer, right? But this is a real life cyber threat hunting at its finest. So, Robert, if you're ready, we're ready to hear your story.
Yes, I am ready. And can you all hear me? I think I should be live.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So yes, we're going to be talking about a case study of a China-aligned APT actor that we track as FamousSparrow. And it's also going to be an interesting backstage view in some of the APT tracking and some of the attribution mess that we have to deal with. So this might possibly have something to do with Salt Typhoon, and hopefully this will be interesting. So Salt Typhoon, I'm pretty sure needs no introduction. I mean, it's only been the #1 cybersecurity news, especially in the US, since around last September, as it targeted all the big telcos and ISPs. But it wasn't just in the US. The targeting was actually worldwide and hit many other, primarily telco operators, but also some other industries as well. So what does this have to do with our subject, with FamousSparrow? Well, if you look online, you might find that, or you'll find claims that FamousSparrow is ESET's name for Salt Typhoon. Well, today I'm going to be questioning those claims because it's just not that simple. So, and to confuse you even more, two other APT names come into play. That is Ghost Emperor and Earth Estries. So these are all somehow related. They might be related. I'll say just that for now, and I'll come back to this at the second part of the talk. So we have been tracking the FamousSparrow APT since 2019. And we've observed that they were becoming more and more active in the past year or two. So last year, we discovered that they compromised several organizations, for example, a research institution in Mexico, a US organization in the financial sector, and the campaigns continued this year as well. So we've seen targets in Mongolia, Japan, in Taiwan. So unsurprising targeting there. But also what was kind of interesting is that we observed something that appears as a Latin American tour of sorts. So we've seen them compromise various high-value organizations in Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Ecuador, and in Argentina. Now, we can only speculate about the true motivation of the threat actor targeting these countries. So in Panama, there's if we look at the geopolitical context in Panama, there's the situation with the canal. For Guatemala and Honduras, it could be for their diplomatic or commercial ties with Taiwan. For Argentina, it could be related to the tensions around Chinese boats illegally fishing in Argentinian waters. And China's interest in Ecuador could be for various reasons, like the new president strengthening ties with the US, perhaps monitoring Ecuador's debt to China. Really hard to say. But let's take a closer look at the intrusion in that US financial organization that I've mentioned. So the discovery of that incident was noteworthy for various reasons. One of them was the geographical focus, because in the past we've seen FamousSparrow targeting organizations all over the world, but the US wasn't particularly in their crosshairs before. Well, that is if you don't count the Salt Typhoon headlines, of course. That is if they're related, but no spoilers just yet. So this US organization, it was a high-profile target. It was a trade group, excuse me, it was a trade group, a financial association that does lobbying. It has many prominent banks, brokers, asset managers, and other financial institutions as their members. So again, in this case as well, we can only speculate why they targeted this organization. But as I said, this association has some really big name members, so it's also possible that this trade group wasn't the final target, but it's possible that some of the members were the real targets, and that this particular incident was a stepping stone to compromise them. So the good thing for our investigation was because our visibility via EDR, we were able to track the development of the whole intrusion. We were able to collaborate with that victim, help them remediate the incident, and through that, we got a lot of really valuable insight into how FamousSparrow operates. That through just regular tracking of their arsenal, but without actually doing the IR, we didn't have prior to this. So the organization, it has a network environment of a couple hundred seats. Out of those, a few dozen are servers, and that's what the adversary was particularly interested in. So they weren't so much interested in the regular workstations. Now, part of this infrastructure was protected by our solutions. Some of those machines were not, unfortunately, and this actually played a pretty important role in the lateral movement that the adversary was doing. So the entry point into the environment was a web server, and the adversary was tunneling through it and then using it to move laterally to the other machines. So they were copying the payloads there through SMB, then using WinRM to execute them. And the way we could identify the compromised machines, the ones that didn't have any security software installed on them, was when we saw the adversary pivoting from them to the machines that were protected. So we saw those unprotected machines as source IP addresses where the lateral movement was originating from. So we were gradually installing our software on them, removing the malware, then identifying more infected machines, remediating those. Essentially, we were playing whack-a-mole with the adversary. Now, what's interesting is also from a discovery point of view, this isn't so much to speak about our capabilities, but I think it's an interesting backstage look at how we were able to identify such an incident from two different angles. So two different teams spotted the detections in our telemetry. So our MDR team spotted that web shell executing some initial commands and some PowerShell. I'll talk about that in just a second. And separately, our threat intel team spotted DLL sideloading that was abusing VLC, which triggered some of our tracking rules. And then, of course, these two teams collaborated, and we were able to help the customer. We contacted them, and we agreed to help them do the IR and remediate the threat. So as I said, the initial access vector appears to have been a web shell on that web server. Now, we can't say for 100% which exploit was used to deploy it, but considering it was running an outdated version of Windows Server and Microsoft Exchange, our best guess would be proxy logon, because this was the vulnerability exploited by FamousSparrow also in some of the earlier cases that we tracked. So we examined the commands performed on that web server, and then we could put together the chain of events, how it went from that initial access to getting the actual payloads installed. So first they ran some discovery commands through the web shell, like whoami ipconfig and so on. Then the threat actor downloaded a batch script from their server, which you can see here. That deploys another web shell. Then the script searches for the installation directory of .NET Nuke, which is an open source CMS built on .NET, and then copies a second web shell there. By the way, this one, it doesn't have anything to do specifically with .NET Nuke, so that was probably just for masquerading. You can see small, but this is the web shell here. It's very generic. Inside there's a hash in one of the comments, which is the MD5 sum of pi to the 7th digit. So what looks like an Easter egg, or possibly something you can hunt for in your environments. So this .NET web shell, it'll start an interactive PowerShell session and then download finally these 3 files, which is the SparrowDoor Trident. So SparrowDoor is being deployed through DLL sideloading through this, what we call this Trident loader. And that's a legitimate, validly signed executable abused to load an intermediary malicious DLL, which then decrypts and executes the backdoor from this 3rd file. A very common technique used by, not exclusively by FamousSparrow, but for many other China line threat actors as well. So in this instance, that abused executable was an old version of the K7AV, but we've seen them abuse a bunch of other programs too, and I'll mention that a bit later. So persistence was established by installing the abused executable as a service. And here's one of the process trees that we've seen. This is an example of that K7 sideload being installed as a service. It launches color CPL exe, which is the Windows color management tool, and then injects its loader into that. So what's interesting is that it took the adversary a little under 4 hours to go from that initial who am I command to getting the SparrowDoor payload installed as a service, which is interesting, and it's actually indicative of a very hands-on keyboard type of operation. It looks like they had the ability to make some decisions based on that, based on the reconnaissance that they did along the way. Now let's zoom in on this flagship backdoor of the group. We call it SparrowDoor, and to our knowledge, FamousSparrow is the only group that is using it. So here, very briefly, I will walk through the evolution of the backdoor or its versions over the years. So we released a blog post on our blog, welivesecurity.com, back in 2021. And then in 2022, there was an updated version which was documented by the British NCSC. And then it appears that there was something like a fork. So Trend Micro describes separate campaigns where the group, they're calling it Earth S-trees. So the group deployed Crowdoor and Hemigate. And based on our analysis, these appear to be the predecessors of the SparrowDoor variants that we've seen in this incident. So let's call them parallelized SparrowDoor and modular SparrowDoor. What's interesting is that both of these versions have been deployed in this single incident, and they're very different, but they appear to be developed in parallel. So we can't really say that like one would be a newer version from the other one, like they're being maintained simultaneously. In terms of functionality, the parallelized variant, I'll start with that one. It handles commands in parallel, each in their own thread, hence that naming, sockets, subcommands, and all that. So it's definitely based on the earlier SparrowDoor versions, but it's a visible improvement in terms of code quality and architecture. So it's more mature. At times, you get the impression that it's even over-engineered for what it's doing. So there are a bunch of various supported commands. I won't go over like the maintenance types of commands, which handle things like configuration, installation, uninstallation, but the actually notable ones are these 3. So it can do an interactive shell, it can handle file operations, and there's a TCP proxy. So this one was actually being used to do that lateral movement on the network, possibly opens up a way of doing orb network functionality. So here are a few TTPs used by the backdoor. These could be used as IOCs. For example, this interactive shell uses pipes with very specific names. And of course, we put other TTPs and IOCs as well. So if you're interested in that, we're more than happy to share. The other variant of SparrowDoor we detected is much leaner. So most of its functionality has been moved to standalone modules or plugins. Those are never written to disk, so they only reside in memory. It looks like this variant was built for stealth. It uses various anti-debug and anti-analysis features. It specifically collects information about installed security software, and then the operators can make decisions based on that. Remember, very hands-on keyboard type of operation. So again, this is executing from a location that should raise suspicion. Now, aside from SparrowDoor, which is their main custom backdoor, here are a couple of other tools that we've seen them use. So they've been using ShadowPad. So this, of course, is a well-known backdoor shared among multiple China line threat actors. But this was actually the first time that we've seen FamousSparrow using it. And if you think about it, there's a lot of functionality overlap in this tooling. Why are they using both ShadowPad and SparrowDoor, two different versions of it even? So there are several benefits, of course. Using shared malware complicates attribution. Also, it can act as a persistence backup. Possibly at some stage of the operation, they could be handing off to a different team that uses this other backdoor. Who knows? They've also been using PowerHub, which is an open source post-exploitation framework, along with the pad potato privilege escalation technique. And they also use this tool to dump LSAS memory, so credential dumping. And what's interesting is that they split it over two different DLLs. So this is probably to avoid detection and sandboxing. And one of those DLLs is sideloaded by a legitimate VLC component, which brings me to the various DLL sideloads that we've observed in this one incident. As I said, they use this technique quite a lot. So there was that K7AV, there was the VLC, there was also Forti Media. We've seen an old Microsoft Office component being used for the sideload. We've also seen a Yandex voice assistant component, which is kind of interesting because this last one is an uncommon sideload, unlike the other ones, which are well known and previously used in many other attacks. So much for the technical overview of this incident. Don't have much more time to get into more details. If you're interested in this, we actually have a write-up on our blog by my wonderful colleague Alex, who's actually the lead researcher tracking this APT. So check that out if you're interested in details or in IOCs, whatever. So let's wrap up this part. So FamousSparrow, unlike Salt Typhoon, hasn't been getting that much publicity like since 2022, but as we've demonstrated, the group was not dormant. They've been improving their arsenal. They've been improving their TTPs. They employed various techniques to avoid detection, as we've gone over in the past couple of minutes. And now on to that second part, which is that question of attribution and to answer whether FamousSparrow is Salt Typhoon. So let's break it down. What we classify as FamousSparrow is this China-aligned cyber espionage actor active since at least 2019. As we wrote in that first blog post that we put out, they've been targeting many different organizations around the world. Their targets span governments, engineering companies, law firms, and rather prominently hotels, especially in the beginning. So that's a very broad mix of verticals. So it looks like they could be going after organizations with some sensitive information about people of interest or important customers. So if you think about that in this sense, the Salt Typhoon targeting of telcos, where they were going after sensitive metadata about customers' communication, it aligns nicely. But in terms of tooling and TTPs, well, that's a bit different. So we've seen FamousSparrow leverage the proxy logon vulnerability, like many other Chinese APT groups around that time. But what's typical and what's unique for FamousSparrow is that main signature backdoor that I mentioned, is SparrowDoor. And since FamousSparrow is its sole user, we cluster this activity around this backdoor's deployment. Now, Salt Typhoon is the name used by Microsoft. It was first publicly mentioned in that Wall Street Journal article about the US telco hacks since September. There have been no mentions of Salt Typhoon prior to that. And if you read into that article, it relays claims by Microsoft that the threat actor is the same as FamousSparrow and Ghost Emperor, which is a threat actor that was described by Kaspersky in 2021. And this was the first public report that actually conflated these two groups. Now, both FamousSparrow and Ghost Emperor were documented around the same time in 2021. And back then, no one made the claim that they were the same. In fact, there are very few overlaps between them, like one shared IP and that's it. Many more distinctions. They each have their own custom tool set. So in our view, Ghost Emperor and FamousSparrow are two distinct groups. Now, the main issue is that no indicators as to how those links were made have been published. Salt Typhoon has been all over the news, but until very recently, which I'll get to in just a second, there were like almost no technical reports, at least no public ones. So Microsoft hasn't really been sharing IOCs or TTPs or provided detailed explanation for how that attribution came to be. And to muddy this mess even more, let's add Earth S-trees to the mix. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the group that is tracked by Trend Micro. And this one does actually have some overlap with our FamousSparrow cluster. So because of that, Trend Micro has made that transitive link to Salt Typhoon. But as I said, again, we've seen no hard indicator to prove that FamousSparrow and Salt Typhoon connection. Now, to be clear, we're not disputing the links the other vendors have made, but we have to question them when we haven't seen the facts to back them up. We can only go on the data we have and on what's been published. So for now, we consider FamousSparrow its own distinct cluster with loose links to the other ones. And rather than conflating all the clusters into one, a better explanation for the links, in our view, is a shared third-party supplier acting like a digital quartermaster, a concept which is very common in the Chinese APT ecosystem. And so for those of you that have been watching this topic, I'm sure you saw that there's been a recent update to the story. So there was a report by the NSA and like around 20 other intelligence agencies from around the world, which is great that this finally came out after quite a long time. And I just have three comments to this report. So it focuses on the exploits and implants for edge devices like Cisco. We don't see an overlap with the activity we track as FamousSparrow, which is mainly malware for Windows endpoints. So this advisory, it's good, but it didn't add that missing link that we were waiting for. The other interesting observation in this report is that it says that at least 3 Chinese companies are named to be behind it. So one of them actually was already previously named and sanctioned back in January, but the 2 other ones are new in this report. And that essentially means that this Salt Typhoon thing is a very, very broad umbrella. And it confirms in a way that digital quartermaster hypothesis. And what's also interesting is that the report explicitly shies away from the Salt Typhoon moniker. So it means that it's not just a broad, but it continues to be a very messy umbrella. So if you're a bit confused at this point, it's okay. And the final thing I'll note on this is that the only way out of this mess, or generally speaking, and I know it's a cliche, but it needs repeating. Please share IOCs. Please explain your attribution so that we can all pivot on existing research and then augment it, expand it, and compare and benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That was a thrilling deep dive into FamousSparrow's return. We have a question ourselves also. After spending some time dissecting this group, what aspect of this campaign surprised you most?
I don't know if it was really a surprise, but it was interesting to kind of follow how they were evolving. So back in 2019, when we were starting to track them, they were like this, I would say, APT group with mediocre capabilities. It was just one of many, didn't really stand out, but along those years, it was really visible as they have been maturing and adding interesting stealth techniques. What, for example, things I didn't even mention, there were also some ties with another malware family that deploys rootkit functionality as well. So that's indicative of like significant resources being put into this. So that's one of the interesting things about this.
So they're clearly evolving. And where do you expect SparrowDoor to evolve next?
I mean, I guess we can expect that evolution to continue. And but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that their advance will be getting more and more advanced. So I mentioned that rootkit, for example. So I'll stick with that for a second. So we've seen that being used for some deployments, and then they got rid of it. Probably was more difficult to maintain. Just speculating here, of course. And in a lot of cases, we actually seen various groups simplify their arsenals, simplify their toolkits using a lot of commodity off-the-shelf tools instead of custom malware. So who knows what directions it will go next.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Was amazing talk.
Pleasure.
And hope to see you live next time. That would be great.